Hey all, Ron here from Military Images Magazine with a new episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail. Today, I'm in the Shenandoah Valley where 162 years ago, Stonewall Jackson led his army on an historic campaign between March and June of 1862. You students of the Civil War are well familiar and well aware with the string of engagements that are forever etched in the history books. Kernstown, McDowell, Front Royal, Middletown, Winchester, Newmarket, Cross Keys, and Port Republic. Through rapid marches and aggressive tactics, Stonewall's roughly 17,000 Confederates got the better of 3 U.S. armies with a collective 52,000 men of arms. Stonewall's successes here deprived Union Major General George B. McClellan of troops he could have used in his failed campaign to take Richmond on the other side of the state by way of the Virginia Peninsula. Here in the Valley, one of the Union commanders who suffered from Stonewall's superior generalship was Nathaniel P. Banks, a brilliant politician from Massachusetts who proved a lackluster military commander here in the Shenandoah and later in Vicksburg, Port Hudson, and the Red River campaigns. During his time here in the Valley in 62, Banks commanded the 5th Corps in the Department of the Shenandoah. The 2nd Division of Banks' Corps was commanded by the man pictured here, Brigadier General James Shields. He was a non-professional soldier who had led volunteers in Mexico 15 years earlier and suffered 2 wounds in battles. Shields' division handed Stonewall a tactical defeat at Kernstown. That was the first major action in the Valley campaign. Now, Shields' division included 2 brigades, and they were commanded by the men pictured here. Nathan Kimball is on the left and Erastus B. Tyler on the right. Both of these men were respected fighters. During the early part of the Valley campaign in March and April of 1862, these brigades were in the vicinity of Harrisonburg, which is about 20 miles south of where I'm sitting right now. Some of the soldiers in the brigades, commanded by Kimball and Tyler, discovered a geological feature that is rather common in the Valley: caverns. It's easy to imagine these soldiers, all young men, coming upon a hole in the ground from which cool air is rising. Curious? A few of the brave ventured down, perhaps with a candle or a torch, and discovered a massive cavern scaling below the ground, its long tentacles punctuated with stalagmites and stalactites. More men climbed down and explored the caverns, and as humans have done for all of existence, we left graffiti behind. Today, the site is known as Melrose Caverns. Yesterday, my wife and I toured this underground wonder, which has only been open to the public for about 3 years. But back in the 1920s, an effort was made to develop the caverns into a tourist attraction as part of another caverns called Endless Caverns. A Civil War museum opened and it operated until 1967. Since then, Melrose Caverns has been used as an event space with uncounted weddings being performed near a massive stone column with evidence of bullet holes, very possibly left by soldiers who were goofing around during their time in the Valley. On the tour, we saw dozens and dozens, maybe even hundreds of examples of graffiti. Most of them were names, and the earliest we saw dated from 1829, and you can see it here. This is an engraving or an inscription by Thomas Lincoln, who's related to the 16th president of the United States. We also saw names scrolled in charcoal by the sons of Confederate veterans in the 1870s. However, it was the Union soldiers from the brigades of Kimball and Tyler scratched into the stone wall and so well preserved that they appear to have been made only yesterday. These etchings dominated the walls. I couldn't help myself. The moment that I got home, I began to do some research on just a few of the names to see what I could find. And all of these men I'm about to share their engravings with you are from the 4th and 8th Ohio Infantries and the 7th and 14th Indiana Infantries. So let's get started. Here's the first one. This is the Jacob Hollabaugh Jr. He was 22 years old when he enlisted in Company A of the 4th Ohio Infantry as a private on April 18, 1861, just less than a week after the bombardment of Fort Sumter. Hollabaugh mustered out of the regiment at the expiration of his 3-year term of service in June 1864 and died in 1887. The next one I want to show you is here. This is Harry Fisk of Aurora, Indiana. He enlisted on September 13th, 1861 as a corporal in Company A of the 7th Indiana Infantry. He was captured during the Valley Campaign at the Battle of Port Republic in June of 1862, probably just a couple of months after he left his name here. He eventually gained his release, returned to the 7th, and mustered out as a second lieutenant at the end of his 3-year enlistment in September 1864. He died in 1916. The next individual is pictured here, or I should say his name is Thomas McCool of Monroe County, Indiana, joined the ranks of Company K of the 14th Indiana Infantry in June of 1861. He received a discharge for disability in January of 1863. His wife filed for a widow's pension in 1890. Here's our next soldier, Harrison Woodsmall. As you can see, he's known as Harry. He's from Owen County, Indiana, and began his war service as a sergeant in Company H of the 14th Indiana Infantry. That was in June of 1861. After he scribbled his name on the cavern wall, months later, he suffered a wound at the Battle of Antietam and received a discharge for his injuries in January 1863. 6 months later, he returned to the Army as a captain in the 115th Indiana Infantry. That was in the summer of 1863, and soon advanced to major of his regiment. After the war, he became a lawyer and a politician, and finally, a Baptist minister and missionary. During the post-Reconstruction period, he focused his efforts on Southern Black Baptists. He died in 1888. Now, meet Edwin Ruthven Wyeth of Vigo County, Indiana. He joined Company F of the 14th Indiana Infantry as a private in June 1861. He received a disability discharge in May of 1864. I found a letter written by one of his comrades named Hiram Ath. It's dated May 5th, 1863 from the battlefield of Chancellorsville, and this letter describes Wyeth's actions during the fight. I'm going to read a quote from that letter. Ed, that's Wyeth, Ed got through safe. He did not get shot, but he hurt his back while running after the Rebs. We got them to running, and we run them about 3/4 of a mile when we come to a little branch, and Ed went to jump over it, and his foot catched in a branch, and he fell and hurt his back so that he had to leave the field. He's not with the company today. He's at the hospital helping to take care of the wounded. He fought like a wildcat while he was on the field. I don't think that he could stand to run so far as he did, for he was complaining of his back before he went into the fight. Wyatt survived it all and lived until 1888. The last individual I want to share is Wilmot Jackson. You'll notice he spells his name wrong. He misses the L, and that's possibly because he's working in a dark cave with a candle or a torch, and this part of the cave is a big dip that goes into a tight space. He probably had to lay on his back to write this. He was only 18 years old when he enlisted as a private in Company I of the 8th Ohio Infantry. That was in August of 1861. He scribbled his name here probably in that March-April period of 1862 and went on to fight in the rest of the Valley campaign, but he barely survived it. He was suffering from disease. He was admitted to a hospital in Washington, D.C., and he died there on November 25th, 1862. He was buried in the Military Asylum Cemetery, and his remains were later removed to where they rest today at the U.S. Soldiers and Airmen's Home National Cemetery. So this is just the beginning of my research. There's a lot more to go. My hope, as you all know who follow this channel, is to find original wartime portrait images of these soldiers so we can put a face to the name and to these inscriptions. I should also tell you that I've now identified some folks over at Melrose Caverns who have been compiling a list of all the graffiti, and I'm hoping that we can work together with Military Images Magazine and all of our wonderful contributors. And I hope you too, if you know where some of these images are, will be able to hopefully help Melrose Caverns achieve their dream, which is to have a wall of photographs and details about the life and services of all the Union men, but also the Confederates, these sons of veterans who scribbled their names after the war and other names that are yet to be found. I didn't even get into the Native American markings that are in there, and I'll have to talk about this on a later episode. So thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode of A Life on the Civil War Research Trail.